All right, welcome everyone. So today we're talking with Nancy Comfer, who is the founder, the starter, and I think these days the chief everything officer of Florida Unschoolers, which is an online resource. And we'll talk more about what it is because it's really filling a gap for a lot of families here in Florida who are trying to figure out and navigate this new terrain of what do you do, what's school actually for, and what is going to be the right fit for your family. And Nancy is joining us from Hobe Sound, which is up in Martin County. She reminded me that's just north of Palm Beach County, so not too far from where we are located here in Fort Lauderdale. And I'm just super excited to chat with you, Nancy, because I see all the work you've been doing behind the scenes with Florida Unschoolers, and I just want to express on behalf of, we'll get started with an expression from our family and I think many other families out there, which is a big heartfelt hug and thank you for all that you've been doing, really putting a lot of your time and effort into something. This is not a business. This is, you're not doing this to make money out of this. You've just been putting, Florida Unschoolers is no cost. It's donation. The donation is much appreciated, but creating resources to help folks navigate what it means to homeschool, unschool, and in a little bit we'll talk about deschooling too.
Thank you, Tobin. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Just interested to learn more about your enterprise, your Acton enterprise here. And yes, Florida Unschoolers is booming right now with all the chaos in the other schools. People are trying to figure out whether they can join the home education world and keep their kids home and keep them safe. And it's really sort of strange right now because it's
Yeah.
not the usual long-term home educators who either want to do a traditional homeschool or unschool. And we have all kinds in Florida Unschoolers. It's this whole new crowd of people who are just looking for a place to land that's safe for their kids, that will hopefully be a good experience for their kids, not just sitting at home waiting, and doing this horrible online stuff that they sometimes have to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, when the pandemic started, there was a lot of that. We'll do something different, we'll wait it out, and then things
Right.
will go back to normal. But
Right.
the other trend that I've seen, and I'm sure you're seeing this on your end, by the way, folks, Florida Unschoolers, the Facebook group, the online resources, I mean, this is not a small, it started as a small project with
Very
Nancy's own
small.
children, but it's 17,000, over 17,000 people in the group finding these resources.
Only 10,000. Only 10,000.
Oh, it's 10,000. Okay.
Only 10,000 and some hundred.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really mushroomed. And, there were a significant number of kids enrolled before this, but broke through 10,000 with this new pandemic business. It's just been years building and building and building because home education in all its flavors has just gotten so much more popular and so much more acceptable. It used to be people didn't know if they would get in trouble, for being at home with their own kids. No, you're not going to get in trouble. You have to do a little paperwork up front, and then you can go about your business, enjoying your life. Being accepted by, the lady at the grocery store and your doctor and your neighbors and all this, that has just gotten to be the norm in so many communities in Florida. So business is booming.
Yeah, I think that the experiences that we've all had in the last year or so around this topic of school education, what is the right fit for each family, because each family, it's often very different from, walk over to your neighbor and they need or want something a little bit different for them.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like the emperor has no clothes moment for education. Like
Well, I
this.
think a lot of people got to see what the curriculum is that their kids are doing every day, and it's so, drones on. And unfortunately, most families have to pay the rent, and at least one person, and probably two or three people, need to go to work to pay the rent. And that's just the reality. So your kid has to be someplace safe and hopefully having a good experience learning. And I think a lot of families have sort of seen that this the public school curriculum that they were doing online with their kids was not what they thought it was, and maybe they could do a little better if they have the opportunity and the choice, and can afford it. It's hard for a lot of families to do anything but public school, but if you can, we were always just on a shoestring budget, and if you can figure out a way to do it, homeschooling gives you that choice and doing something different or better or more appropriate for your actual child.
I think you bring up a great point that it is a transparency that we just haven't had before, because so much of this was brought into our homes through Zoom, through this, cobble together what this is going to look like when people were forced to, in these unusual circumstances. And of course, as we speak today, which is end of August in 2021, it's a tumultuous time. There's a lot of folks that are really upset.
Yes, it's back, and people are not, masking up and getting immunized, and the little kids can't even get immunized yet. And it's, Florida's #1 in, deaths by COVID, and it's just horrible out there. So people are being put in a really hard situation. So they're looking at all these alternatives, and I'm happy to have them, enroll with my school, and they'll be happy to hear about your school. That's another choice.
Yeah, that we have our own family journey that we've been on. Our daughter Divya has actually been a Florida unschooler for the last couple of years. You have been a fantastic resource for us. When we moved to Florida, we found you. We thankfully found you and a lot of answers, which is part of what I want to get in today. Right. I want to talk about some of those answers for folks out there who might be trying to navigate these same waters. And how does this work? And what do I have to do if I'm homeschooling? What is unschooling, and what is this deschooling?
Well, I think that's what you'll find when you're getting this thing started with Acton, and I think you'll find that you spend a lot of your time kind of steering people to other options, because as you talk to them, you'll figure out, I just had a long conversation with a dad, and Florida Unschoolers was not the right choice for his daughter. She needed to be registered with the county as a homeschooler. So I helped him to know how to get that information and what he needed to do to switch to that direction instead of public school. So, and you'll find the same thing, I'm sure, that we have to know about all the options as much as we can, or at least that they exist, and point people where they need to be if it's not us.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that, and that is very much, our decision to continue essentially to unschool, but in this Acton format, was really for our daughter. She's 8 years old. We have 4 older children, but they went through the traditional education track. They graduated high school. They're all doing their own exciting things now. But for our 8-year-old, it really was this. We found for us the right fit in the unschooling model, and Acton allows us to continue that, but in a group format with some of those
added. Yeah, and homeschoolers and unschoolers. Fewer unschoolers, because there are just numerically fewer unschoolers in the homeschool population. But homeschoolers do get together. They have support groups, and they have co-ops and all sorts of social activities that don't necessarily relate to where they go to school. They're out in the community volunteering or working, or doing, taking a class in flute lessons or something, whatever they're interested in doing. Or going to the local public school for some sporting thing they want to do, some athletic thing, or being in the school band or whatever. Kids can get out in the community and join these homeschool groups and have social outlets that way. But I understand what you're saying about the Acton sort of setup, where you'd be in a particular place getting to know a group of kids every day. So that's a different dynamic, and that is going to appeal to a lot of people. I would think that they would want their kids to be socializing with, like-minded families who want this more open-minded education, but, with a group of kids every day.
I think, can we start with definitions, Nancy? I think that this is important for folks that may be entering this space for the first time. Can you just sort of break down for us the homeschooling, the difference between a homeschooling approach, an unschooling approach, and then talk a little bit about why you personally have just made this heartfelt commitment to why deschooling is so important in this process.
Okay, well, listening to this podcast and reading a lot and talking to other home educators and generally giving yourself permission to take the time you need to understand what your options are and what sort of category you might eventually feel comfortable in, because none of it's going to feel terribly comfortable at first. You're going to be coming from a traditional school background, and now you're at home expected to figure out how to do everything by yourself, and it's a lot, and it can feel frightening. It can feel overwhelming because, unlike eons ago when I started homeschooling, there are just endless opportunities online, and the bookstores want to sell you hundreds of dollars worth of things, and the library's got programs, and every activity in the county has a homeschool program, and that's all wonderful, but it's a lot when you first start. So taking a breath, giving yourself time to sort through the different options, deciding what you might want to try, and then finding out you didn't like it, trying something else, really processing all of this just overwhelming information. That's all part of deschooling. And that whole long process, it doesn't take, the weekend. We withdraw our kids on Friday and we're going to have it all figured out by Monday. That doesn't happen. We withdrew our kids on Friday, we got the new enrollment done on Monday, and now we're going to take the next semester or year, at least months, to figure out how we're going to organize our day, what activities we're going to include and decide not to include. How much curriculum do we want to use? None at all, which would be toward unschooling, or a little bit of curriculum, mix and match, math and English with some other resources. Now you're a relaxed or eclectic homeschooler. Or do we want to use a full curriculum? Some people, find one they like and they do all the subjects that way, and that's how they set up their life. And that's homeschooling. So you have traditional homeschooling with a full curriculum, relaxed homeschooling, which is where a lot of people end up, where you have a mix of a little bit of curriculum and some other things. And then you have unschooling with no curriculum, but a very full life, learning in many other ways through living well and getting involved in whatever activities your child is interested in. And figuring out where you're going to land on that spectrum and what resources you want to use and how busy you want to be, what your schedule is going to look like. Are you an early riser? Do you like to sleep in? Do you like to be outdoors? Do you like to be on the computer? Whatever is going to make up your day takes a while to figure out. And that whole process is called deschooling. And I think a lot of people, when they first start homeschooling, they think, well, I'll just sign the kid up for 6 flex classes, or I'll just go buy $300 worth of curriculum, and there, I'm done. I'm homeschooling. And no, life is better than that. And there's more to the day than that. And it takes a lot of thought and commitment and research and reading and thinking and changing changing as your kid likes something or doesn't like something. And all that whole process of deschooling takes as long as it takes. And getting comfortable with giving yourself permission to take that time is hard. Because you always sort of feel like, oh, I should look busy, or I don't look like I'm doing school, but you don't have to look like you're doing school. You don't have to look busy. You have to figure out what's right for your family, and all that's deschooling. I guess I do kind of rant on about that.
Well, I think you figured out that this is the glue that holds it together. And I actually want to build on that question for Nancy. Out there right now, there's a mom, there's a dad who's in this process, and they're feeling guilty and asking themselves on a daily basis, am I doing enough? Is my son or daughter getting what they would have if I had kept them in traditional school? What would you say to that parent that's sort of wrestling with those feelings? Because you have this perspective, not only from your own, what you did with your own children, but seeing thousands of other families navigate this as well.
I would say you're not done deschooling, that you still have that mindset that someone some authority somewhere needs to tell you how to organize your day and what your kids should be learning, and what the eventual outcome should be. And it's going to take a while for you to let go of that guilt. Guilt isn't going to help anything, so try to put that burden down, and to really talk to your kid, spend time with your kid, see what really clicks with them. If they really like that math program on the computer, great, do that. If it's boring them, stop doing it. And don't feel guilty that you tried something and it didn't work. Now you can eliminate that from the list. You've made a huge commitment. You're probably, income levels have probably dropped because somebody's not at work. This is a big deal, and you've taken on a big responsibility, and don't feel guilty about trying to do a good thing for your kid. And it just will take a little while until you feel comfortable and can let go of those expectations that you think other people have, when in reality, they aren't really thinking about your kid. You need to just worry about your kid and enjoy your time, because you have lots more time together now to do fun things. It doesn't all have to look like school, and it shouldn't all look like school. And it can just be a lovely, lovely way to live, and you don't have to worry about what other people think.
I love that answer. It is a journey. And one of the things I love about the answer is that you talked about it in the perspective that this is an investment. It's a financial investment, an investment of our time and commitment. And I think, again, thinking of this mom and dad out there that might be wrestling with some of these feelings, what the perspective that I sometimes hear from families is that it's that the level we're trying to achieve is the traditional school model. Like, if I had left my son or daughter in traditional school, they're going to be at least at this level. I'm making hand gestures that no one can see.
Right.
Up to here. And then I think sometimes we forget that with this opportunity to explore truly a hero's journey, a fulfilling life, that's the baseline. That's not the top level that we're trying to bring our children up to so that we at least match what they would have got. No, it's an opportunity to go far beyond that, because the sort of factory model of traditional education, I think we all see, going back to that transparency that we started with, it's not working. It's not working for a lot of families, not everyone.
For a lot of kids. And the baseline that you're talking about, that's almost incidental to living well. You don't need to spend 6-8 hours a day slogging through repeating the same concepts. If you can incorporate them into a life well lived, adding and subtracting are going to come up. Reading is a lovely tool that you're going to use all the time. Yes, there might be at some point where you're giving your kid actual direct instruction on something. But a lot of times things are sort of turned into lessons that, if you will just live your life, you will find fractions are handy, and knowing how to measure distance is handy. And all these things that we turn into a lesson they're incorporated in what people learn about because they're useful. And you will find that you're using that information and it will come up in a well-lived life. If you sit there all day and, just sit in the closet and don't do anything, your kid's not going to learn much. But if you are doing anything, if you're getting out, being active, whether you're a nature person, whether you're a sports person, whether you're a bookworm, whatever your category is, your child is going to be exposed to a lot of these baseline type concepts, incidental to enjoying learning about whatever topic they're interested in. How to go to the museum and look at art, and let's learn more about art. Well, that involves reading, and it involves knowing how much it costs to get to the museum, and it involves a lot of things that individually could be broken down into a little lesson and bore the tears out of anybody. But altogether, it can just be a lovely trip where incidentally you learned, that there are many different kinds of art, and now we can go home and read more about that if we're interested, or do some of it. So it's just a different way of realizing that this level that you're talking about is not really a very high level. And if you make it into the entire focus of the day, learning how to add 2 + 2, there's just not much content there. If your kid, learns to read, well, the next question is, what have you got that's interesting for me to read? Why should I care about reading if all you've got are, worksheets? I need books that are interesting, or stuff that's online that's interesting. I need to have a problem that I learn how to solve so that I can use this great tool you've given me of reading in some way that's fun, and then I get more practice at the reading, and I build my vocabulary. And it's just, you can start from that baseline and then just live well.
Yeah, you've emphasized that a life well lived several times, and I think that is a really important part of our conversation today for someone who might be exploring this for the first time. What is school actually for? So it's, traditionally education has measured against, 91% of our graduates go on to higher education, and that was the gold ring, the brass ring that everyone was trying to achieve. But you've emphasized something more, which is the life well lived. And I want to take this
who are intellectually curious about the world, who start with this base of information, however they accumulate it, but then haven't had the idea of learning made into a bad thing in their life, that they are still intrigued by things, that they're still curious, and they still like learning because it hasn't been made dreadful. That when they have a question, they're happy and they're like, oh, I have a question, let me go look it up, let me go ask someone. That's living well, as opposed to, oh no, I have to do another worksheet about a question that I don't care about. It sort of turns you off to learning altogether. So at the end of the process, whether your child, whether they go to college or not, or trade school or work or wherever they're going, if they're out in the world and they're continuing to learn and continuing to build their knowledge base, that's a better outcome than the kid who can, pass all the tests in school and never wants to look at a book again in his life.
Yeah, especially in this world that we're living in today, where the jobs, the occupations, the businesses that will be built, the work that many of our youngest generation will be doing probably doesn't even exist yet. So that love of lifelong learning might be the best gift that we could give anyone for a world that's changing.
And the confidence to know that when you have a question, mom and dad might not know the answer because they're old now, but you've got a question and you're 30, and deep in yourself that you are capable of finding out the answer. And you have all these tools at your disposal, and you're in the habit of finding the answer to something, as opposed to just sitting there waiting for somebody to give you the answer.
This has been, what you just described has been, honestly, for me, my biggest challenge in the active model. So my background has been teaching workshops and teaching online for a dozen years now. Yeah. And in an Acton Academy, the guides cannot and do not answer questions. Because that onus is always it's learner driven. It's always brought back. So you can ask your friends, you can, use your resources like Google or books or anything to find
Where
answers.
do you think we should look up the answer to that? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no. And so I'm having to retrain myself,
right?
From a background as a traditional. Yeah.
And that's a thing. I went to public school. Most of the people in this generation have gone to some kind of formal school, and we've got a lot to unlearn before we can let the kids have the space to be in charge of their own learning. With us standing there, ready to help and support and offering the tools and guiding where needed, but not stifling it with our agenda about what order things should be done in.
Yeah, 100% agree. Nancy, if you'd share a little bit, so your own children are grown adults now, so you shepherded them through this process. I think sometimes folks have a misconception that homeschooling, unschooling is something that's done in the primary grades. And then when you get into middle school or particularly high school, a transition starts to happen in it. You can't homeschool at that level, or you can't do it as well. Can you? I know that wasn't your experience. Can you share a
No,
little bit
no,
more?
and it's not the experience of a lot of people. I think I think a lot of people have their 6-year-old and they think they know what's going to happen, and 12 years later, it's completely different from what they thought it was going to be like. So a lot of the people who go into homeschooling sort of get how they're going to do elementary school, but they haven't quite thought about, you know, what a child is going to need or want to learn about when they get older. And for unschoolers, it's not, you know, it's not broken down by grades. It's following interests. Um, it's giving them the space and the time and the tools to explore things they're interested in. My daughter's a big reader. She just never was without a book in her hand. My son, big online guy, just always with the video games, and he did all his reading, mostly news and things like that, as far as I know, online. All of his input is mostly online. And that's, you know, they're both college graduates. They did great in college. And it was sort of not hard because they were able to be independent enough to, if they had a question, they could find the answer. And I think generally speaking, colleges are thrilled to get homeschoolers and unschoolers because they're not waiting there to be spoon fed. They are used to taking the initiative and showing up because they're doing something that they want to do as opposed to just being the next thing on the list. My daughter left homeschooling to go over to the local community college for the last 2 years of her high school years to do dual enrollment. That worked out great for her. She went right into college. She's now doing fantastic. My son unschooled all the way through and then went to work for a few years before he decided to go to college. So completely different paths. And, you know, he graduated. He's doing great in work now. They're both doing terrific. They're both the best kids ever. But, you know, completely different paths. And from day one, they were very different, just, you know, different personalities, different interests, different speeds of doing things, different social lives, just every way that you can be different. They were different. So you can't know at, you know, when they're 6 years old, where they're going to be, you know, at the end of what their high school years would be. You can just sort of help them to get to that next spot, or at least get out of their way. I think that that's part of it, is give them the space and the time and the trust that you trust that they're going to make good choices, and that they've had all these years of practice at making good choices. They didn't just, you don't just say, okay, you're 16, now you're in charge of everything. It starts when they're 6, you know, when they're 4, and they're involved in their own day, and they get to decide things, and they get to practice making decisions. And as you said, as an acting guide, you help people by pointing them maybe to resources as opposed to just spoon feeding them the answer. And that's a lot like unschooling. You help people to find the information they need, you give them the resources they need, and you get out of their way. You know, it might not be something you're interested in. Goodness knows I do not want to do Taekwondo. But my son did that since he was 6, and from the time he was 6, and he still does it. My daughter was very much into art and acting and all that, things I have no ability to do. But that was her interest during her, like, what would be her middle school and high school year, her teen years. So, I just supported them. There's a lot of driving, a lot of planning of schedules, but supporting them in their interests and letting those interests be a foundation for them to learn how to navigate in the world, and find out if they are interested in something and drop it if they're not, move on to something else, or stick with it. Like my son, he just amazed me one day at 6. He wanted to do this thing. I was like, okay. And so we tried it, and he just has done it ever since. Um, but the whole high school, junior high, high school years um, isn't dramatically different from the elementary years. If you're unschooling, you just continue to support their learning and then see where they want to head. And honestly, prepping for college is not all that hard if you're, a well-read person who has interest in the world, and you can pass a basic math test. It's not that hard to get started, either at the community college or at a different type of school, or a four-year college. So it just, there's no block. Just because you haven't done everything the traditional way for 12 years, that's not a block to doing something more traditional, maybe to get the job that you want later on, because sometimes you got to go get the degree to do the thing that you ultimately want to do. And that's just the story of them being completely opposite too. I'm rambling on here, but let me say one more thing. My daughter had a very specific goal and knew what she wanted to study, and went and got that degree, four-year degree, bachelor's, and then went on. She worked for a while, and she went back and got her master's in that field, and she's doing great. That's what she wanted to do, I think, from about age 13. My son, on the other hand, here's the other side of the coin. Like I said, he went to work for a few years. He went back to school. He got a specific kind of degree, and now he has a job where he's doing very well, has nothing to do with his degree. So he, got the bachelor's degree, but then didn't want to go into that field at all. So you just never know. You can't plan your kids' lives for them. You've got to sort of start to let go and say, okay, they're going to figure this out, with all the support and love that you can give along the way.
The other thing that I heard you've mentioned this through your own children's stories, but also, it was earlier in our conversation. It is unique. Each person's journey is unique to them. It's unique to the family. What is going to be the right fit for one family, one individual, to find their interest, to explore these different options that will end up. We've talked about where it starts when we sort of make that decision to deschool and step out of the traditional environment, to now you've shared a couple examples with your own children of what that pathway can look like as you enter into adult life, and sort of that well-lived life that we describe.
Right. It's different for each child, even within the family. And you may not decide to unschool if you're, looking at all the ways to learn at home. You may want to use a more traditional approach with a curriculum, and that's fine. But that's not all there is to the day. And so building your whole life, that does sort of take over your life, because the kids aren't away at school all day long. You're involved with them a lot more. Is a lot more complicated than what curriculum am I going to use, or am I not going to use one. There's more to it than that. And it's going to depend on, your child. Maybe they're special needs, maybe they're gifted, maybe they're into music, maybe they're into sports, whatever really grabs their interest, that may pull them along and drive them to, carve their own way.
Nancy, can you stop for a moment to share a little bit about how Florida is different and unique as a state in the requirements? Because there are county requirements and registrations, and I know that's really, or at least my understanding is that Florida unschoolers came because this is an option for families to register and be able to handle some of this paperwork. So what else is unique about Florida that folks here in our state need to be thinking about?
Well, I don't know every other state's laws, but in Florida, and some states have no laws about homeschooling, like Texas, you don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. Some states are quite rigid about what they require of homeschoolers. I think New York is one of them, and I want to say Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure. But Florida, not great at supporting the public school system. A lot of our public schools are drastically underfunded, but very good at leaving you to your own devices if you can figure out a way to afford to homeschool. And even if you register with the county, which is the option most people hear about at first, that is sending a letter of intent to your county school board and then keeping a portfolio and a journal and having an annual evaluation every year. Even that is very hands-off. The county does not tell you how to homeschool. The evaluator does not tell you how to homeschool. They simply note that your child made progress appropriate for them for the year. So that's a very freeing way to do things. Florida Unschoolers is maybe one step further into people leaving you alone. It is private school enrollment. It is a specific kind of private school. It's an umbrella school, and umbrella schools have been around since before there was an option to register with the county. So private schools existed, and then people started doing umbrella schools, and then the county option grew. The only requirement for private umbrella schools is that you can't set one up just for your own child. You have to be willing to enroll other children as well, and that's just based on some law, some case law. But that doesn't mean you have to have 10,000 kids like I do. You might have an umbrella school that has 10 kids because they all are in your neighborhood, and that's how you've decided to run your private umbrella school. Or you might, you're all people who are using a certain curriculum, or people who travel, or people who want to, take a certain approach to learning at home. And that's what you've limited your private umbrella school to. Mine, I have no such limits. My basic goal is to leave you alone. I take the enrollment paperwork that people send me. Okay, you sent me everything. Your kid's enrolled in a private school. Technically, legally, they're a private school student. So they're not truant. Because you have to do something. Your kid is of compulsory attendance age, which is 6. They either have to be in public school or private school or registered with the county as a homeschooler. Or if you're wealthy, you can hire a tutor. So your child would be a private school student under my umbrella school, and you would report attendance, which is the parent checking in every few months to let me know you're still there, you still want to have the child enrolled. The child is in attendance every day, so it's sort of silly to call it attendance, but that's what it is. And that's it. After that, you're on your own to create your day, to craft how you want your home learning life to look and what you want to do with it. So I guess Florida, I know other states don't have the umbrella option, or they do, and there are a lot more restrictions, but I'm not an expert on what all the other states do. Maybe there are some that are just as lovely as Florida.
Well, for the purpose of our conversation today, we're particularly interested in the Florida families in getting information out so they know what those options are, that they can register as a homeschooling family. They'll have that. They'll create the portfolio. They'll have their review at the end of the year. End of the world. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. At the end of the year, they'll do the review, or they have this umbrella school option.
That's if they're with the county. If they're with me, there's none of that, or other umbrella schools. And each umbrella school is a private school, privately owned, privately managed. The owner of that private school, beyond enrollment paperwork and attendance, the owner of that private school decides what to require. So you should shop around, find the umbrella school that suits your needs. And some of them will charge you something. I don't, but some of them will. And that's because they provide services like they will help you find a curriculum. They will put together a transcript for you. They will print you out a pretty diploma at the end of the 12 years. So find the umbrella school that suits your needs. And there are many. Not always easy to find. There are several lists floating around the internet. But the only official list is the Florida Department of Ed. There's a directory of all the private schools in Florida, but the umbrella schools are mixed in there. So you really can't tell from that list which one's a private school. So if you see a bunch in your county, you can start calling them and ask, are you an umbrella school? Or find their website, and that it should be clear on the website. But yeah, those are the two options, county or umbrella school.
Nancy, can you share? You've already shared with us the experience and the journey that you went on with your son and daughter. They're adults now. You continue to honestly pour yourself into Florida unschoolers. And I say that because I'm a member of the group. I see what you do on a day-to-day basis, not just processing paperwork, but answering questions, helping families make some of these big decisions about what is the right fit for them, and helping them navigate these waters. Why do you continue to do what you do?
Because I'm crazy. Lately, it has been 10-hour days of just people who are panicking and do not know what to do in this horrible situation with this pandemic. And how can you not help people? They need the information. They need a clear answer. They don't always get a clear answer. And the county and the public schools are not allowed to tell you, you have to go over here or you should go over here to try another option. They can give you the information about their program, but they're not allowed to push your kid out of public school or push you out of homeschooling with the county by telling you to go somewhere else. So you sometimes get this very truncated set of information, and it's a lot of verbiage that nobody really explains clearly. So that's what we try to do on the website and on the Facebook page, and you'll see other experienced homeschoolers, FUers there, piping up with information, and it's just to help people. They're just so overwhelmed, and even in a normal year when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, every mom with a 5-year-old just suddenly freaks out that their kid, oh no, what am I going to do about school? So it takes a while to digest all the information. It's great that Florida has these choices, but it's also overwhelming. You've got the public school, then you got the public virtual school, you got Florida virtual school full-time, Florida virtual school flex. What should I do? What should I do? Homeschool with the county. Oh, there's an umbrella school. I never heard of that before. It's just, now that has even begun to touch on curriculum or no curriculum or your approach or your philosophy or any of that. And it's just days and days of reading and talking to people and learning and digesting all this information. And I remember being that lost mom and having my son in public school and him being just miserable and sadder each day. And it had not occurred to me that his sad mood, he was the saddest little 5-year-old you ever saw, might have something to do with what he was spending hours every day having to do. He could already read, and he was basically just trying not to get in trouble in kindergarten was his big focus. And it was just not a good time for him. And finally, it dawned on me that, oh, maybe we could homeschool. And then I found out about the county. And then a year later, I found out about the umbrella school option. And that's when I started Florida Unschoolers. But it takes a while as a parent to learn about all these different school options and then to find your little category that you're going to be in once you know the big categories. So I remember.
Well, your dedication, and I would also say your generous heart, it's seen. A lot of us see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and giving of yourself. So I just want to express that appreciation. Nancy, I've just one last question. Is there something that I should have asked, or that maybe our Florida families should be thinking about, or even asking themselves, that we need to cover before we wrap up here?
I would just point out what you and I talked about before, that maybe some families who are unschooling would be interested in a program like yours, the Acton program, for that group sort of experience. And I don't know if the Acton program offers a part-time option or not. Is that something you could talk about? What if I'm an unschooler and I want my kid to go there like a co-op sort of thing 2 days a week? Can I do that? Or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer is actually unique. So I'll actually share as part of this recording that there are currently 10 different Acton academies in the state of Florida. geographically distributed. Our school happens to be in Fort Lauderdale, but they're all over the state, and so that decision is made. With each school, the folks that start that school make those decisions. But the short answer is yes. And because our school is actually launching in January of 2022, our daughter is actually doing exactly what you described. So she's going to be a part-time student at Acton Academy North Broward. And that's because we're actually doing the school of one, essentially the unschooling, homeschooling, but we're using the Acton process with her. We started this week, but we also want her to have this. For us, it's not just the group engagement and the social aspects, because as you mentioned, you can do sports. There's after school programs. There's a lot of ways to access that as well. Right. But for us, there's a learning arc that is structured into the Acton Academies that we really appreciate. It's not curriculum, but they talk in terms of quests and challenges. And again, because it's all individualized, so a learner can explore what's really interesting to them. But that learning arc is something that we wanted our daughter to experience in the fall through one of our neighboring schools. Essentially, we've made friends with the folks in North Broward. That's Natalie and Frank Faro, and we're happy that Divya is going to be joining their school family. And then as we launch in January, we'll be building our group here in Fort Lauderdale.
She'll move over then. And so you don't have to be an unschooler necessarily to try the Acton approach. You might be comfortable with curriculum, but just need to let go of that a little bit.
Yeah. So yes, a lot of families come from traditional education and it's just not working for them for different reasons, but they choose to leave traditional education and come into an Acton Academy. Our interest, and we were one of the families that came from your group, the Florida Unschoolers. So I think the unschooling way of thinking, the methodology, the sort of mindset that's created, which is to step back and, when we help, when we advise, when we step in to save and rescue people, we're actually hurting them in the long run. And so I think unschooling really teaches that independence. And that's how a young person comes to take ownership. I think you saw this with your son and daughter. They took ownership of their own education. It wasn't you guiding them. It was theirs. And now they're in a much better place because of that.
You support and you love and you provide resources, but you don't dictate the outcome. And that's what I'm seeing in what you're describing at the Acton. So any sort of person who's looking for an alternative could try the Acton. It doesn't have to just be an unschooler. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. Sometimes I have a little very calm Facebook page called Not Exactly Florida Unschoolers, and you've probably seen it. And it's people who are looking for something. They don't want to homeschool their kid, but they want something that's not public school. So, and I'll see different names of organizations pop up, and Acton keeps coming up. And so I'm glad to talk with you and learn more about the philosophy, because it sounds like it would appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that was our experience, that we found what we were looking for, and we are looking to amplify or extend that. And that's, for folks out there, this conversation wasn't specifically about Acton Academy, but if you're interested in learning more, there's a great book out there called Courage to Grow. It was actually written by Laura Sandifer, who's one of the founders of the original Acton Academy out of Austin, Texas. And that was really what started our own journey. So I'd encourage folks just to, even if you're just curious about what different options could look like for your family, what that experience might look like, I think that's a great resource to learn about what it means to be truly learner driven, because it's learning the ugly way sometimes.
Well, most people who come to me, they end up enrolling, but there are people, like we talked about earlier, who you need to steer in another direction, that, Florida Unschoolers is not going to be the fit for them. For most people, it's fine. It works out great for them. But maybe they need to explore, Acton, or, go to the county, register with the county, or whatever the other options are. So, and I know you do that too. You don't always assume everybody's going to end up at Acton if that's not going to be a good fit for them.
Yeah, that's very much also part of the culture, and you'll see this with, I mentioned all the other schools around the state, that it's finding the right fit for the families, and the right fit, honestly, for the school culture, because the culture is what, when you get the culture right, that learning atmosphere becomes just a rocket ship in the most fun ways possible. So it's really important to create that really inclusive, fun atmosphere. Uh, just as we wrap up here, Nancy, the one last thing I wanted to mention, and this is for any folks that may hear this, and if you are in the Fort Lauderdale community, we're actually hiring right now for a guide position in our school. So if you are a homeschooling, unschooling mom or dad, you sort of understand and appreciate this kind of a non-traditional approach, that more of a focus on the learner and less on the teacher, and you'd be interested, we'd love to talk with you filling that position.
It sounds great. It sounds great. Okay, well, it was wonderful to talk to you, Tobin. I'm glad I got to learn all about this.
Yeah, Nancy, I so appreciate you taking the time. I think this recording that we created is going to be a wonderful resource. We're going to share it with as many folks as we can get it in front of. And because I know you're a great you're going to be the right fit for a lot of families out there. If someone's interested in what we do, that's great too. But it's more important to have the information and make good
Right.
choices for each family.
Absolutely. Accurate, complete information is what people need just to help them sort through all of this. But thank you so much, Tobin.
Yeah, and again, just a last appreciation to you and all that you're doing, Nancy.
You're wonderful. Thank you.